Cynthia stood near the champagne fountain adjusting the strap of a dress she couldn't afford. It was a beautiful gown, but if you looked closely at the hem, you could see the slight fraying, just like her life. At 36, the former beauty queen title was fading and her bank account was even drier than the vintage brute in her glass. She was here for one reason, to find a provider. A man with a title. A CEO, a lawyer, a plastic surgeon. Anyone who could save her from the mediocre life she had been running from for 10 years. If you love stories where justice finally finds its way home, hit that subscribe button right now. Give this video a like and comment legacy down below so I know you're ready for this journey. Because the payback in this story, it isn't just about money. It's about the legendary transformation of a man who was told he was nothing, and the woman who realized too late that she had thrown away a king. Now let's go back to where it started. Then the room went silent. The double doors swung open and the flashbulbs of a dozen photographers turned the hallway into a blinding white tunnel. A man stepped through. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had been molded onto his frame by the hands of God himself. He didn't just walk, he commanded the air around him. Cynthia's heart stopped. She knew that walk. She knew the way he tilted his head when he smiled. But the man she knew drove a rusted 2005 Toyota Corolla. The man she knew wore shirts with ink stains on the pockets. The man she knew was just a teacher. As the MC stepped to the microphone, his voice boomed through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, the founder of EDU Global, the man who just graced the cover of Forbes as the tech visionary of the year, Mr. Samuel Okoro. Cynthia's glass slipped from her hand. The crystal shattered against the marble floor, splashing expensive champagne onto her knockoff heels. Samuel's eyes panned the room, calm and powerful, until they landed right on her. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. He looked at her with the pity one gives to a stranger they've long forgotten. Before I tell you how a man who was once mocked for his poverty wage profession became the most powerful name in global education, I want to welcome you back to the channel. Here we tell the stories the world tries to hide. We tell stories of the humble who rise like the morning sun and the proud who fall because they couldn't see the treasure right in front of them. We believe that your value isn't found in your bank account but in your character. Now let me take you back 12 years to a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood Cynthia called the Trenches. The apartment on Cascade Road smelled like old books and Cynthia's expensive perfume, a scent she insisted on buying even when the light bill was 3 days overdue. Samuel sat at the small wooden dining table, surrounded by stacks of ungraded history papers. He was 25, full of passion and exhausted. He spent his days at Westside High, teaching kids that society had already written off. He didn't just teach history, he taught them how to survive. He stayed late to coach the debate team for free. He bought pens and notebooks for students out of his own meager paycheck. Samuel, are you seriously still working on those papers? Cynthia walked into the room, her face tight with irritation. He was beautiful, radiant, dark skin, eyes that could charm the stars out of the sky, but those eyes were currently filled with daggers. She was dressed to go out, wearing a dress she'd bought on a credit card Samuel didn't know about. Just a few more, Samuel said, rubbing his eyes. If I don't get these back to them tomorrow, they won't have time to study for the finals. These kids need this. These kids. Cynthia shouted, slamming her clutch bag onto the table. What about me, Samuel? What about us? I am 24 years old. I should be at the Intercontinental having brunch. I should be flying to Tulum for the weekend. Instead, I'm stuck in a 2-room box with a man who thinks a Teacher of the Month plaque is going to pay for my Brazilian hair. Samuel sighed, his voice calm, the way he spoke to a restless classroom. I know. It's hard right now, Cynthia. But I'm working on something. I'm developing a curriculum, a digital platform that could change how school districts operate. I'm doing the work now so we can have a future later. A future. Cynthia laughed, a cold, sharp sound that cut through the quiet room. Samuel, you are a teacher. You will always be a teacher. You'll get a 2% raise every 3 years and a pat on the back. My friends, Stacy and Monica. Their boyfriends are real estate developers. They drive Porsches. They don't have ink on their fingers, Samuel. They have gold on their wrists. Money isn't everything, Bean. I'm building something that matters. It matters to you. It doesn't matter to the landlord. It doesn't matter to me. She walked over to him, her voice dropping to a whisper that was even more painful than her shouting. I made a mistake, Samuel. I thought your potential meant you were going to be a principal or a superintendent or someone with power. But you're just a classroom teacher. And I am too beautiful to be a teacher's wife. That night, the silence in the apartment was heavy. Samuel tried to reach for her in bed, but she turned away. He lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about the lesson he had taught that day, the Great Depression. He didn't realize he was about to live through his own. 3 weeks later, Samuel came home with a box of donuts. He had finally secured a small grant for his debate team and he wanted to celebrate. But when he opened the door, the apartment felt different. It felt empty. The closet doors were wide open. Cynthia's shoes, the ones he had skipped meals to help her buy, were gone. Her perfumes were gone. Even the decorative pillows she'd insisted on were missing. On the dining table, resting on top of a stack of ungraded essays, was a single sheet of paper. Samuel, don't look for me. I'm going where life is actually happening. Spend the best years of my life waiting for a teacher to become a man. You're a good person, but goodness doesn't pay for the lifestyle I deserve. I've met someone who already has what you're only dreaming of. Goodbye. Samuel sat down in his chair. He didn't cry. Not yet. He just looked at the red ink on the papers in front of him. He looked at the donuts. Then he picked up a pen and started grading. He had nothing left but his work. And if the world thought a teacher was nothing, he was going to show them exactly what nothing could build. While Samuel was grading papers in a quiet apartment, Cynthia was in the back of a black Range Rover sipping champagne. The man beside her was Marcus. He was 40, wore a $5,000 watch and owned a consulting firm that Cynthia didn't quite understand, but the offices were in a skyscraper in Buckhead, and that was all that mattered. Marcus didn't talk about changing the world. He talked about closing deals and leveraging assets. You okay, baby? Marcus asked, his hand resting on her knee. I'm perfect, Cynthia said, leaning her head back. I just feel like I can finally breathe. I was suffocating in that little life. I told you, Marcus smirked. A woman like you is a trophy. You belong on a pedestal, not in some government-subsidized apartment. You're with the big boys. Now. Cynthia felt a surge of triumph. She looked at her reflection in the window. It had done it. She had escaped the mediocrity. She blocked Samuel's number. It deleted every photo of them. He wanted to erase the memory of ever being a teacher's wife. But what Cynthia didn't know was that Marcus's assets were built on a foundation of sand. And what she also didn't know was that back on Cascade Road, Samuel had just stayed up until 4 a.m., coding the first prototype of a program that would eventually be worth billions. While Cynthia was learning the names of the best plastic surgeons in Atlanta, Samuel was learning how to live on caffeine and conviction. The first 2 years after Cynthia left were the darkest. Samuel didn't just lose his wife, he lost his confidence. Every time he looked at his Teacher of the Year plaque, he heard her voice. You are a classroom teacher. You will always be a teacher. He started to believe her. He looked at his bank account and saw the $412 that had to last him until the end of the month. But then one Tuesday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. Samuel was staying late at the school library working on his digital curriculum, a platform that used AI to identify exactly where a student was falling behind in real time. A young man walked in. It was Andre, a student Samuel had taught 3 years prior. Andre was now a sophomore at Georgia Tech, wearing a university hoodie and a bright smile. Mr. Okoro, I was hoping I'd find you here, Andre said, dropping a backpack onto the table. Andre, look at you. How's the engineering program? It's amazing, sir. But honestly, I'm only there because of you. Remember that Saturday you spent 6 hours explaining calculus to me at the Waffle House. Because I couldn't afford a tutor? I never forgot that. Andre paused, looking at Samuel's laptop screen. Is that the software you were telling us about? The 11th grade? The EDU Global Prototype? Samuel nodded, a bit embarrassed. It's just a hobby, Andre. Cynthia, well, she used to say it was just a dream for village people. Andre shook his head firmly. My uncle is an analyst at a private equity firm in Ito. They're looking for edtech disruptions. Sir, let me show this to him. You aren't just a teacher. You're the person who built the bridge I walked across to get to my future. Let me help you build your bridge. That was the first spark. But the fire didn't catch immediately. Samuel spent the next 3 years being rejected. He walked into glass-walled offices in his only suit, the one Cynthia used to mock because it was off the rack. He said, across from men in $3,000 loafers who looked at his resume and smirked. You're a history teacher, Mr. Okoro. This is a complex algorithm. Why should we trust a man who spends his days grading homework with $1 billion idea? Samuel would always give the same answer. Because a teacher sees the world not as it is but as it could be. I don't just understand code, I understand the human mind. And that is the most valuable asset in the world. He lived in that same apartment on Cascade Road. He drove that same Corolla. Until the transmission gave out and he had to take the bus. He was a ghost in the city. Nobody saw the man on the bus with the old laptop. Nobody knew he was building an empire on a transit pass. While Samuel was rising, Cynthia was realizing that gold has a very cold touch. Life with Marcus wasn't a fairy tale. It was a business transaction. Marcus didn't want a partner, he wanted a showpiece. He paid for her hair, her designer bags and her luxury SUV, but the price was her soul. He was never home. When he was loud, drunk, and talked down to her the same way he talked down to his employees. Marcus, I was thinking, maybe I could start a small boutique? Use some of my eye for fashion. Cynthia asked one night over a $400 steak dinner. Marcus didn't even look up from his phone. A boutique? Cynthia, look at you. You're a beautiful woman, but you don't have the brains for business. To stay pretty, keep the house clean, and make sure you're ready for the gala on Friday. That's your job. Don't start thinking you're Samuel the teacher trying to change the world with a dream you can't afford. The mention of Samuel's name sent a shiver through her. She hadn't thought about him in years, but hearing Marcus use him as a punchline hurt in a way she couldn't explain. Then came the year the sky fell. It started with a knock on the door at 6 a.m. It wasn't the delivery man. It was the FBI. Marcus's consulting firm was actually a sophisticated Ponzi. He hadn't been leveraging assets. He had been stealing from retired firefighters and elderly widows. Within 48 hours, Marcus was in handcuffs. Within a week, the Range Rover was repossessed. Within a month, the mansion in Buckhead was seized by the government. Cynthia stood on the sidewalk with 3 suitcases, the same ones she had packed when she left Samuel. Her friends, Stacy and Monica, didn't answer her calls. They didn't want to be associated with a federal investigation. Cynthia found herself back where she started, but worse. She was older, her reputation was trashed, and she had no career to fall back on. She moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood even rougher than the one she had fled. Took a job as a receptionist at a car dealership, earning just enough to pay for her bus fare and her memories. She would sit in her small dark room at night looking at the cracks in the ceiling. She thought about Samuel. She wondered if he was still at that high. So she pictured him with some other woman, a mediocre woman who was happy, with donuts and ungraded papers. She felt a twinge of guilt, but she buried it. At least I'm not a teacher's wife, she would whisper to herself, clinging to the last shred of her pride. 3 years later, the St. Regis Gala. Cynthia had managed to snag an invite through an old contact who felt sorry for her. She had spent 2 weeks' salary on a gown from a luxury consignment shop, hoping, praying, to meet someone who could pull her out of the dirt one last time. She was standing by the champagne fountain when she saw him. Samuel. But it wasn't the Samuel she knew. This man was radiant. He moved through the crowd of billionaires like he was their king. When the MC announced him as the visionary of the year, Cynthia felt the air leave her lungs. She watched from the shadows as Samuel gave his speech. He talked about Westside. He talked about Andre. He talked about the power of a teacher. He didn't mention her. He didn't mention the apartment on Cascade Road. He had outgrown her so completely that she wasn't even a footnote in his success story. After the speech, the crowd swirled around him. Cynthia waited until the circle. Then she adjusted her hair, put on her best pageant smile, and stepped forward. Samuel. He turned. His eyes met hers. For a second she saw a flicker of recognition. But it wasn't the longing she expected. It was the look a traveler gives to a landmark they passed 1,000 miles ago. Cynthia, he said, his voice deep and steady. It's been a long time. I saw the cover of Forbes, Samuel. I always knew you had it in you, she lied, her voice trembling. I was so proud of you. Samuel tilted his head, a small, sad smile touching his lips. Did you, Cynthia? Because the last time we spoke you told me I was just a teacher, and that goodness didn't pay the bills. Cynthia stepped closer, touching his arm. I was young, Samuel. I was foolish. Made a mistake. Marcus, he wasn't who I thought he was. I've realized that. What we had, it was real. I've missed you. Samuel gently but firmly removed her hand from his sleeve. No, Cynthia. You don't miss me. You miss the lifestyle you thought I could never give you. You miss the version of me that appears on the cover of a magazine. But the man you see here today, he was created in that apartment you hated. He was built during the nights I spent grading papers while you were out with Marcus. You didn't want the man, you wanted the trophy. And trophies don't have hearts. Samuel, please. I have nothing. I'm struggling. Samuel looked at her, and for a moment he looked like the teacher again, the one who had to tell a student they had failed the final exam. Cynthia, I have a foundation that helps women in transition find housing and job training. I'll have my assistant send you the link. It's a good program. Helps people build their own future instead of waiting for someone else to hand them one. He looked past her, his face lighting up. A woman was walking toward them. Wasn't wearing a beauty queen dress. She was wearing a simple, elegant navy gown. She had the eyes of a doctor or perhaps a scientist. She looked at Samuel with a deep, quiet respect. This is my wife, Dr. Araba Okoro, Samuel said. She was a volunteer at the shelter where I first launched my software. She stayed late with me every night to help me test it, even when we had nothing but a shared bowl of rice. Araba smiled warmly at Cynthia, unaware of the history between them. Nice to meet you, she said. Samuel turned back to Cynthia one last time. I hope you find what you're looking for, Cynthia. But remember what I used to tell my students. You can't build a mansion if you despise the bricks. You despise the bricks of our life. So you don't get to live in the mansion. He walked away, his hand on Araba's back, leaving Cynthia standing in the middle of the ballroom. She looked down at her champagne glass. It was empty. Looked around at the billionaires and the celebrities. They were all watching Samuel. Nobody was watching her. She walked out of the St. Regis, past the Rolls-Royces and the Bentleys. Walked to the bus stop. As the bus pulled up, the same bus Samuel used to take while he was building his dream, she sat down and pulled a crumpled magazine out of her bag. It was the Forbes cover. She stared at Samuel's face. She realized then that he hadn't changed. He was still the same man who stayed late to help Andre. He was still the same man who believed in a better world. The only thing that had changed was that now the world believed in him too. And she was the only one who had been too beautiful to see it. And that is the lesson of our story today. Your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. The world will try to tell you that you are just a teacher, just a janitor, or just a dreamer. But remember, the greatest empires are built by those who are willing to work in the dark while others are chasing the neon lights. Don't ever let someone who only loves the crown make you feel bad about the cross you are carrying today, because one day your cross will become your throne, and those who left you when you had nothing will be the ones watching from the front row as you achieve everything. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to keep grinding and stay humble, please hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to know. that their mediocre start is just the beginning of a legendary finish. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a lesson. From our modern folk tales. My name is Modernist Africa Folktale, and remember, a river does not drink its own water and a tree does not eat its own fruit. Live for your purpose and the prosperity will find you.